for joining my YouTube channel. My name is CPA Jimmy Mwide, and I will take you through Chapter 4 of Advanced Audit, which is Management Audit Practice. Last time we were in class, we introduced about it. We say that basically this chapter covers the procedures of doing an audit, not going in details, but giving a line of how we underdo or how we partake the audit as a whole. We say that the stage starts by the auditor himself accepting the client's appointment. We say that's referred to as client acceptance. And I recall I said that when client acceptance, I do not refer to client accepting. The client does not accept appointment. The appointment is accepted by the auditor. So client acceptance here means the process of the auditor accepting the call and the appointment by the client. And we say that before the auditor accepts the call by the client, he needs to uh, maybe share my screen so that we'll be together. We say that he needs to first of all do some preconditions. There are some conditions before accepting, because you know very well that when the auditor accepts, there are a lot of risks that he involves himself into by accepting the appointment. So what are some of the preconditions that he may undertake to minimize the risk that he may do to minimize the risks? These are things that you need to know. What is he supposed to do to minimize the risk? So let me share my screen so that we move together. Let me share my own screen so that we move together. So we can see the screen. Thank you. So like I was saying, we can see very well this is talking about the client acceptance and retention acceptance. Client acceptance is a process through which the auditor accepts the appointment by the client, not client accepting. The client does not accept. The person who accepts is the auditor. So client acceptance and when you talk of retention are how to retain the auditor, how to retain the procedures that have to be done to retain the auditor. Then we also looked at the introduction of a tendering services, how and when should the audit services be tendered. We look at just a brief highlight of the same. We also looked at professional appointments in the previous lesson. We also looked at materiality, planning, assessment of risk, amongst others. We also looked at the methods and techniques of auditing high risky areas, of course, the critical high risk areas, one of them being the cash areas, being the e-commerce style or e-commerce businesses. These are highly risky areas. And we also went ahead and looked at the internal control systems. How and when should the auditor use the internal control system? And today we're to look at the preparation of the audit working papers. So we'd introduced, like I was saying, that before the auditor accepts, he needs to do some preconditions. These preconditions are basically to help him to minimize the risk that may be associated with the internet a little bit or slightly gone. Yeah, so like I was saying, the preconditions are usually done to minimize the risk, and the preconditions are usually done at the side of the client and also at the side of the auditor himself. Then also the auditor must also confirm that there is a common understanding. He has to ensure that there is a understanding, common understanding common understanding between the management and whether they also understand the role of the auditor in terms of the audit practice or as part of the engagement. So upon determining the what we call the preconditions. Remember, so the preconditions were there in the notes that I had earlier on shared. We went an extra mile and say that, well, after we determine that all the preconditions are done and are met, then the auditor has to now enter into the engagement. How does he show that he has accepted? Through the letter of engagement. And we say that engagement letter is basically a letter that is prepared by the auditor, submitted to the management, or basically those charged with governance, to agree to sign. When they sign, it shows a consent, and it sets out the contractual relationship between the auditor and the client. It sets out everything that is needed in the agreement between the auditor and the client. It has a lot of content. It looks at the objective and the scope of audit work. It looks at the legislations that will be covered. It looks at forms of communication, how they are going to do their communication, and expectation of how the management will expect the management letter, and an affirmation that the management letter has to be given, an expectation that management will provide what you call uh, letter of representation, also an arrangement concerning the planning and performance of the audit, how the audit will be undertaken, arrangement concerning the use of internal auditors or internal staff within the entity, which is also discussed there. They also talk about the inherent limitation of audit, to just clear that the auditor is not there to discover all the frauds and risks, but rather to minimize them to an acceptable level. Then also the expectation that management will provide access to all information. Very important that the management of the entity should allow access to all relevant information by the auditor when required. There should be no restriction about the information that can be captured or information that can be gathered by the auditor. That can be gathered by the auditor. On the same, there also all these are contents of the management, of the engagement letter, which we had earlier on discussed. We also went an extra mile and looked at tendering of services. We said, when should they tender? We said that a company may decide to tender for audit services when perhaps maybe they are not satisfied with the current auditor, or when there are some major changes in the client size of the business, and that may mean that the business is big and the one auditor cannot be in a position to handle, so they may tender to get basically an additional auditor. Then also a statement of independence, that is when they feel that the independence of the current auditor is not or is at stake. Also, poor performance of incumbent auditor. The auditor who is incumbent, if he's not performing to the expectation, they have all the right to tender their services upon resolution by the shareholders. In case conflict of interest, it's very important. We also said in case there's also disagreement, in case of they feel that the audit fee is a little bit higher, they can also tender. And also for the main role of audit rotation, where we usually say that to avoid getting used, or to avoid or to get better quality experiences from different auditors, it's always good to do audit rotation. Well, and we say that that's it. All the notes I already discussed them earlier on. We also say that what happens when you're running for a tender. We say that the audit committee leadership has to show that there is a need for that. Then with the audit committee leadership, they shortlist the candidate. Then the company sets out the questionnaires to the potential auditors. Then the finance director and the procurement function, of course, who may be there, could also in a way be involved in this process, because they understand how the organization is structured and how operations are done. And once this obtained information is done, the audit committee is given the shortlisted people to select an auditor who is recommended by the board for appointment. For appointment. Then the prospective auditor is asked to tender for a proposal. The proposal could be like a terms of reference to show like a proposal for what he has, what he will do, and the proposal should have the background of the information of the entity, should show experiences of the staff, should show work that were previously done, should show how they determine their fees, among others. So all that information is also involved in the tender proposal, which we had earlier on looked at. So I told you that this was a brief like show of how how the audit goes. This is where the auditor has to what we call the preconditions to ensure that the preconditions are set to ensure that the preconditions are set. Then background knowledge. After there, now they do background knowledge of the business. The auditor has to know the business itself, has to know the background, has to get the background knowledge of the business and understand how the business operates. After there, the planning of the audit is done, where they are involved to plan about the audit. Planning, we said it involves even coming up with audit strategies. It also comes up with the coming up with time. We said plan is a detailed is a detailed is a detailed document that shows how the auditor will do the work. That is the scope, which people will be involved in the work, the timing, and every other information which is related to that, including the gathering of the evidence. Then after there, they have to ascertain the systems. Remember, we said that when we're auditing, based on the approach that you're using, before taking and the undertaking of the work, you need to ascertain the system, the compliance testing to check whether the systems are strong and whether they can be relied upon. Then, if you find that they can be relied upon, then that means it will affect our information, and we have just to verify the documents and see whether they are complying. Whether they are complying. In situations where the systems are not strong, then we may be forced to do substantive testing aimed at gathering the audit evidence. Then after the evidence is gathered, before any other or before going deeper, the audit senior, the people who are in charge, have to define analytical review procedures, which are aimed at basically ascertaining the materiality element, basically determining whether the information captured is enough to provide or to support their opinion, amongst others. Then after capturing or after reviewing and they pack that information is handed over for final review of the audit. This final review could be done by not the people who did, because the people who did the audit, or rather, they were in number 6, where the final analytical review procedures were done. So the final review of the audit here is done by either an auditor within the firm who was not directly involved in the doing of the work to ensure that there is quality, or another auditor from another firm is given the same information to review to ascertain that that opinion provided would still be the same opinion, even if another auditor was undertaking that. Then after there, uh, whatever we go ahead after confirming that the information is okay and whatever is provided is fine, then the next move is drafting of the financial information, or rather audit report, and after there is a signing the audit report. So all this information is what we had checked, and we had looked at control systems, and we were to go to acquiring or gathering of the information, where we had working paper. So you'll allow me, because we'd already looked at that, just to jump direct into my page, which is talking about working papers, which is preparation of audit working papers. So we said here in the preparation of the audit working papers, this refers to, of course, audit documentation covered in International Standards of Audit 230. So in this case, the audit documentation is record for all audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusion reached by the auditor in the working paper. So every information in regard to how the work was done, in regard to how the evidence was obtained, also scans of the evidence that was obtained, as well as the mechanism that they used to come up with or to reach out the decision, should be involved or included in the audit documentation, what we call the working papers. So the working papers are basically the materials that are used, the materials that are prepared. Could be either soft, could be hard, amongst others. So the examples of working papers could be the audit program itself. In case we are doing analytical reviews and analysis, also the analysis should be shown. Issues regarding to memorandum, the memorandum itself should also be shown. Correspondences any correspondence, that is any communication amongst the auditor and the client should also be there as part of them. Checklist that was provided by the auditor to the client is also part of the working papers. Letters of representation, or even the management letter, which is the letter of internal weaknesses. All this information are part of the working papers. So we usually say that for a working paper to qualify, or for us to say that a working paper is good, it should have it should be as comprehensive as possible. That means it should be more detailed as possible. It should also contain accurate information. Accuracy means that the information that can be relied upon. On the same, it should contain the facts. It should not have assumptions. It should have the facts, and it should be properly indexed and organized. That means the filing, the organizing of the information should be in a particular or a specific positive manner. They should be prepared neatly and tidily. That's what I'm saying. That it should be very clean, very spacious. If it is about printing, the margins should be okay, that the information should be appealing. That's what we're trying to say. Any personal judgment that may be given by the auditor as a result of their experience, as a result of their past reviews, should also be explained. Any symbol that is used must be explained clearly. For example, in audit, others may use some small ticks, some green pen, and other things should also be explained. Any symbols used must be explained. They should also be properly bound, that is the binding if they are physical, and they should be well secured under key and lock. That means where they are kept, it should be locked very well. Well, what's the importance of documentation? The reason why we have to prepare documentation is one, it provides evidence that the audit was planned and carried out in accordance with standards. Two, it provides a basis for auditor's conclusion. The auditor will provide his final opinion based on those audit documentation. It also provides direction and supervision, especially because I said one of it is the audit plan. The audit plan provides direction and supervision. They facilitate quality control when we shall be reviewing for quality, when we are reviewing quality to ensure that all the stages are reviewed or are undertaken. Because quality control is to ensure that we pass through as agreed, we follow all the procedures and standards of auditing as agreed. Also to facilitate control for the current year's work, which is true, and they can also be used for training in case we have some staff and other things, and also maybe new auditees. We can use them to train them. And lastly, it provides information about the dates of the finding. On the same way, how are the working papers organized? We basically put them, or all these working papers are usually kept in two audit files. The first one is called permanent. Permanent is usually used for putting working papers that contain information which is recurring in nature, and that is their relevance may go beyond the current year. So these are information that will be used again and again and again, again and again and again. So for example, if you get a 5 years contract with a company for audit, then in that case, that means the statutory documents, which are articles of association, memorandum, associations of incorporation, registered auditors, the shareholding document, all those will be kept under permanent audit file because you are still going on with the work for at least a period of 5 years. So that information is recurring in nature. You will not keep on asking them for the same. Relevant legislation and other statutory materials such as copies of companies stock exchange regulations, how they issued their shares and how many shares they issued and authorized. That information should also be there. It's permanent. Copies of documents continuing relevance to the auditor, such as engagement letter. Also, the engagement letter should be there, especially where the agreement was for the 5 years. It should always be there. List of the lawyers, bankers, insurance brokers, and advisors. If the company maintains, basically these are like agreement with suppliers, should be maintained. The physical addresses or the postal address of the company, that's very important, and a description of the entity business and its operation, very important. Then the other one is the current audit file. The current one is used to in nature that will short term benefit is within a period of like 1 year. So this document that I maintained there will be things like current year's files, financial statements, audit plans for the period, because audit plan is usually done for every task. Internal questionnaires, which you are given, copy of management letter for every audit, letter of representation for every audit, significant matters such as significant risks that were discovered, results of audit procedures, amongst others. So these are the main two files that we do maintain. So this document we talk about, the reason, the way we manage them, or the quantity or the details or the largeness or the volume, depends on the factors such as the nature of the engagement. If the nature of the engagement is compilation engagement, then basically that simply means not many working papers will be there. But if it is an engagement, if it is an assurance engagement, then we expect a lot of documentation. The size and complexity of the entity, of course, if the entity is big, documentation will be big. If the risk is also high, the documentation will be more. Nature, as well as the procedures. Nature of the audit procedure performed. That's what I'll just say. Audit methodology used. So depending on the methods, it will also determine the extent of the audit documentation. Significance of the audit evidence obtained. Of course, if we are doing where we are supposed to give negative opinion, basically we may do detailed review, and in that case, because for example, when you're doing due diligence, the information may be used in the court of law, or the information may be used to make big decisions. So for that case, also, you need to be very, very keen, and the information that will be required will be more. The nature and conditions of the client's internal control system. If the control systems are good and strong, then our work is simple. That simply means we'll not have a lot of engagement or working papers. Okay, so when you talk about also, they go deeper. Remember, I talked about the audit files, but when you talk about working papers, most of them say that they are categorized into basically two: standardized working papers and unstandardized. Standardized is where you use a standard manual. Where you use standard manual. Automated, this is where you use electronic. So unstandardized is where there is no standard for how you are going to do that. Standardized could be maybe the organization as a template, as a specific template of how they are going to undertake their things. Automatic is where they maintain inside the system. It is online, it is digital, And nowadays, because of the digital era, majority of them are maintaining the digital digital information. Although, of course, digital information has a lot of risks that are involved, risks that like they require a lot of time, they require computer, require very expensive software, they require computer literacy, risk of data maybe manipulation through maybe hackers, amongst others. Yeah. So all that information you should be kept, and the risk depends with how the organization is ready to minimize the risks. How the organization is ready to minimize the risks. So there was a question that arose, I think you can see here. They were asking who has the right to maintain the working papers. The working papers. This was a case. This was a custody. It was a case that was there. So who is supposed to maintain the working papers? The working papers belong to the auditor. You need to know that. So the working papers, the allegation of these guys were like the working papers were collected from the client company, which is true. But remember, they signed confidentiality agreement. The client had paid fees for the service, so he believes that I should be the one to maintain them. Working papers contain secret of the client. He was saying that he's supposed to maintain them. That the auditor is an agent of the client, so he's working on behalf of the principal, which is true. However, that does not give him right to maintain. But what was the argument? Why is it that they're supposed to maintain? So the argument is that one, the auditor is not an agent, but an independent contractor. The auditor has the right of lien of the working papers because until he is paid, and not even until he is paid, he has the right to lien the documents, to stay with the documents. Majority of working papers are auditors' own recording, so they cannot say that this was their own work. This was recorded by the auditor, and the auditor has a professional obligation to show the successor audit working paper. So when you remember when we say that when the auditors are swapping, when a new auditor is coming, he usually talks with the outgoing. So the outgoing provides the working papers, and also the working papers are act as defense in the court of law. They are used by the auditors in the court of law. They are used by the auditors in the court of law. So that is it. That is why the working papers are supposed to be maintained by the auditor. So after we gather all this information, like we said, we need to do a quality review. This quality review is captured under ISQC 1, International Standards of Quality Control 1, or ISA 220, which basically talks of procedures that should be adopted by the firm to provide reasonable assurance that the audit done by the firm are being carried out in accordance with the standard. Or rather, these controls are controls for a firm that performs the audit. They are controls that are done by the firm that does the audit. So are not, these controls are not, get the point, these controls are for the auditor. The controls are for the auditor. So why are the controls important? This is because, like I told you, that when the auditor accepts the appointment, he exposes him to a very number of risks. One of it being the risk of giving inappropriate opinion, the risk of damages, the risk of losing the client for future prospective clients, the risk of adverse publicity, of course, a wrong name, the risk of withdrawal of practice something wrong. The family, the institution, the umbrella may withdraw back the certificate. So, in order to mitigate against the above risks, the audit firm requires to implement the controls at two levels. Get the point? At audit firm level and individual audit engagement at firm's level and at individual engagement level. So how does this work? Audit firm level procedures are designed to provide reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel, get the point, that the firm and its personnel comply with the professional standards, regulatory, and legal requirements. It also that audit reports issued by the firm partners are appropriate in that prevailing circumstance. So it is at firm's level. Then when you talk of at individual level, they are designed to provide standard that and guidance on specific responsibilities of employees. So this is to check, are the employees performing well? Are they okay? The procedures here at audit level is to ensure that the firm at audit firm level is they are looking at the firm, whether the firm and its persons are compliant to the standards and requirements, and whether the audit report that will be given is appropriate in that circumstance. At individual level, that's where they look at to check whether the specific responsibilities of the employees regarding the quality control procedures are strengthened or there is that monitoring. So the importance of a high quality audit is usually one to achieve audit objective. It also helps them to operate efficiently. It helps to avoid disputes, of course. It provides high quality and professional service to the client. It also ensures regulatory smoothly. It also ensures that staff are monitored and controlled. Get that. Staff are monitored and controlled appropriately. It also provides the identity training needs. It shows which needs need to be there because when you talk of like at individual level, are the staff okay? Are they competent? Where can we work on? You know, at individual needs. They also provide appraisal system uh, within the organization, and they also provide assurance of the audit process to the stakeholders. So, what are these procedures that we do at individual engagement level? So here we discuss them fully. So this is it. So client acceptance procedures. The first thing is to ensure that all the client acceptance procedures are done. All the engagement procedures are done. And we said this procedures is where the entity looks at, am I ethically right? Is my certificate in operation? Do I have enough people to do this? Do I have experience in this field? Do I have available resources? Is there any conflict of interest? And you also look at, is the client understanding the engagement? Will they provide for me all information I need? Will they understand that it is not my role as an auditor to determine material misstatements and fraud, etc. So if all this procedure is followed well, then we have quality in procedure one. Then the procedure two is the engagement team. The engagement team means the team of the auditor. So the engagement partner should ensure that the engagement team collectively has the skills, competence, and time to do the work. So in this case, what will he be viewing? He will check whether the staff has experience in similar audit. He will check whether they are understanding the professional and technical standards, whether they have ability, whether they know the industry, whether they understand the quality control procedures. The team gets all that, then we will say that number two ensures quality. This is where the engagement partner should always, basically the audit senior, should always review, keep is not review, but is the one responsible to give direction. The engagement planning meeting should take place in which the members are informed of the following what to do. They are informed of the risks related. In simple case, the one giving them direction, telling them the responsibility, including the need of the ethical requirements, tell them the objectives, tell them the risks related, tell them the general audit methodology, you know, amongst others. Then you also need to show them supervision, and supervision should be continuous during the audit. Supervision is like monitoring to ensure that there is track of progress, to check whether the audit programs are flowing well, to address any significant matter which may come up, to identify also matters that may need further consultation. Also, consultation itself is also another matter. What about it? The engagement partner should arrange, of consultation on audit and contentious issues, to consult with those charged with governance and the management. eh, Things like application of new pronoun standards, legal changes, complex reporting system. When a modified opinion is to be issued, they discuss in advance. They also need to discuss documentation, matters of documentation to ensure that all documentations are there, to ensure that all documentations are there, to also to review findings in case there are findings. They also need to discuss before they draw the conclusion. Then lastly is monitoring and review. All this should ensure, the auditor should ensure all these procedures or these steps are followed to ensure quality control. Quality control. So when you talk of quality control, reviewing of quality control is a review to check whether the quality controls are followed. We say we have hot review. Hot review is the quality control procedures are reviewed when still in progress. When the working papers are still produced by the juniors, the review is undertaken. Post review is where it's done after we are already done the work, which is what we are calling it final review, final audit review, which can be either done by someone within the firm who was not engaged to do the report, or another firm outside, So you can see they are here, peer to peer. It can be internal, external. So I want you, Mary, to go and review, check that clearly, evaluate that, and then the other matters remaining will be evaluating the use of control. So this is what we had looked initially at chapter 4 of intermediate, but you can just do them to recap, where you look at the controls that can be put in inventory, controls that can be put in cash, controls that are put in payroll, controls that are put in receivables, among others. So just go review that, so that when we meet next time, we'll go to the next chapter, which is chapter number 5. Thank you so much.